I call this meeting to order. Mary Lee, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ann. If you call the roll, please.
Mr. Keenan. Vice Mayor Saleh. Mayor Lucklider.
Here.
Mr. Reiner.
Here.
Mrs. Voring. Ms. Janice Zerker.
Here.
Mr. Gerber's absent. Or business.
Great. Yes, Councilmember Gerber is out of state this evening. Okay, moving on, presentations for this evening. We have one. We're going to have an update regarding Avondale, which is the National Church Residences development south of town here on Avery Road. Who is here on behalf? Ken, Lighting, and Julie Sofranco. Ken is the community manager, and Julie is the care coordinator. If you'd like to come forward to the podium, please. Thank you. And if you'd identify yourself for the record, please.
Sure. Mayor and Vice Mayor and members of council, my name is Ken Lighting, and I appreciate this opportunity to briefly address you and bring you up to speed on our wonderful community of Avondale. Avondale is a senior retirement community, and we are really appreciative of all of the vision and hard work that you put into making this community come about. My name is Ken Lighting. I'm the community manager. Avondale consists of 100 apartments, 1 and 2 bedroom apartments that range in square footage from about 750 to 950 square feet. It's a beautiful community. It's the apartments are divided equally, 50 apartments in cottages that are like freestanding, if you will, apartments that ring around the property. And then we have 2 mid-rise buildings that have 25 apartments in each. And sandwiched in between them is our big community rec room, our offices, and an adult day services center. So it's a pretty exciting place. There's a lot of activity going on, and it's obviously been a real hit with the community. At this point, we're 97% leased up.
Wow.
And really just very proud of it. It's a beautiful, beautiful community. I think the residents are, that we haven't even finished on the 2 mid-rise apartments, but we finished on the cottages, and those are all occupied, and the residents are extremely happy. We're scheduled to start move-ins on Building A, which is the first apartment building, February 18th, and then March 1st, we will have the second apartment start occupying, at which time we'll be mostly, if not 100%, leased up in full.
Ken, go ahead, Mary Lee.
Do you know how many of your residents actually were Dublin residents and moved into your facility?
That's actually a very good question. I do not have the statistic right off the top of my head, but I will say that a good portion of the guest cards say drive-by, live-in area, that kind of thing. And so I would say probably, you know.
I think that would be a good number for us as a city to have, since we made a significant investment. So drive-by isn't living, having been, you know, a resident of, actually of Dublin proper.
Yes, you're right. I'll try to get that information. I'll pass that on to you. One thing I did want to mention about our community is that we are an age-in-place community. So old age and frailty are not a problem. We will have a medical staff on site. We have a lot of services available, and we're hoping that for most people, it can be the last place they ever have to move to.
We had a lot of interest early on from Ponderosa around the corner.
Yes.
Do you know if
Only 2 residents moved in from
Only 2 from there? And is there interest further, or do we not know?
I actually interviewed a Ponderosa resident today who's interested, so they're still continuing interest.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Mike, I understand that in the time it took to build it, some of the old military people that we were really concerned with from World War II and Korea, something like 12 of them had died before the thing was finished, so didn't really get the opportunity to move in.
So what's the, I'm sorry. Very good. The occupancy at this point in time, I mean, how many units are spoken for?
Well, 97 units are spoken for. They're already, they're pre-leased, excuse me. And I would say right now, we have 36 apartments actually occupied. And in the next couple of weeks, we'll have pretty much all of the cottages occupied. And then February 18th, we'll have 95% of the of Building A garden apartments occupied.
And did you have some kind of plan for an official grand opening that council might attend?
We do, and a lot of that is based on when is construction going to finish. Our main rec room will not be done until about the middle of April. So I'm just guessing that probably around May 1st, we'll have a grand opening.
Okay. Well, I know council would look forward to it. I mean, all of council was very supportive of this project, and many of us were there for the groundbreaking. That was kind of a muddy sight at the time, but fun and exciting nevertheless.
Well, we will make sure that we send you a personal an invitation, and again, I really appreciate all of your help and vision in bringing Avondale apart. If I could, I'd like to introduce my partner, Julie Safranco. Julie is our care coordinator, and she is a licensed nurse and social worker, and she handles the the health needs and things like that. I'll let her explain her role, but it's a very, very dynamic role.
Good evening, Julie.
Good evening. Thank you very much. It's great to be here and to give you a report about where we are. The vision for Avondale was not just that it would be a home for individuals to live, but it would be a community of support. We are following what is, many of you may have heard, a patient home medical model of care for the residents that will be residing and living, whether they're in the mid-rises or in the community, in the apartments that are on the outside of the mid-rises. When I talk about a patient model of care, what I'm basically saying to you is that we will have a health center on site with a primary care provider working with a medical doctor, as well as a therapeutic staff, physical, occupational, and speech therapy, and an adult day program, not just for the residents of Avondale, but also for the community at large. We're already meeting with individuals from the community in Hilliard and a couple in Dublin that are looking for adult day programming for their loved one who is in their home, and they really just need that kind of support through the day. This is really beneficial because regardless of what their diagnosis is, we will have social workers on site, nursing on site, therapeutic services. So if they're there and they're receiving programming and there's a need for those therapies, they can be done there. They can also provide personal care on site. My role as the care coordinator is not just to assist them in that function, but it's also to work with the residents that are living in the community that may need additional support services so that they can truly live independently. And so many of them I'm qualifying for services through senior options. A couple I've assisted in applying for Medicaid. We're working with some providers for safety support services by alarm systems, working with physicians so that if our residents are having surgery, that whatever they need post-operatively can be managed on-site, either in their apartments for the most part. We did have one individual who did need to go to the hospital and suffered a stroke, and unfortunately that was something that she needed to go to a community or to a rehabilitative care center, but she's finished her therapy and she's coming back home to her apartment, which is what's the most important part of it, that she was able to be seen and treated in another National Church residence mid-rise assisted living and long-term care facility, and now she's coming back to us. So my day starts with many phone calls, and my role is to be there to support all of the residents, regardless of, whether they're there because they're in a subsidized apartment or they're there because they're in a market apartment. And so, I don't see them in terms of what they've come with. I see them as individuals, and I want the care to be very personalized. And I deliver that to each one of them with a commitment to maintain their confidentiality. So they can feel safe in communicating with me what their concerns are. So I do want to acknowledge Mayor Lee, who was very helpful to us. She has visited us and has seen the property, and she and I spent some time having breakfast, and she's really enlightened me about other services and the hands, her program that she's responsible for, and all of those different services that now we can access for some of our residents. The other thing is I've had 15 residents who are subsidized, living in subsidized apartments, that we've actually signed up through the Dublin Pantry for food support. And we're working with the Mid-Ohio Food Bank for fresh fruits and fresh vegetables and other food supports that will be, as the weather gets nicer and that's available, that'll be on site. And the other thing I want to tell you, our goal is that they have quality of life. And so I'm really introducing them to the Dublin community, making sure that they're learning about this community as well as the Hilliard community, because some of them have come from Hilliard. And so we're signing them up for the recreation center. We want them to participate in the activities. We really want them to feel like they belong here and that this is their home, not just their apartment. And so that's a very strong goal, that quality of life. And that's part of what I think will be holistic and treat them as a whole person.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Ken. Thank you, Julie. Good luck with all your move-ins. And we look forward to seeing you in the springtime.
Julie, I had one quick question. Have you touched base with the Parks and Rec Director at Washington Township?
Corey?
Is it?
The Corey?
Yeah.
Yes.
I know
yes.
they have a program there of core people in and around that area, specifically within Amlin and outlying township
Yes.
area.
We just had an event there.
As well as Dublin, so.
Yeah, we had an event in Washington Township at the community center this past week. Our Home and Community Services met all our residents and had a brunch there. And we talked about upcoming activities for the month of February and March, and we're going to use that center until our community center is open. And I want to use those parks all summer and the walking paths. I'm a resident of this community. I love it. And so I really want to share how beautiful Dublin
Yeah,
is.
I just wanted to encourage you to touch base with those people because they have a lot of contacts in that community, senior community as well, so.
Very
thank you.
good. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you all. Moving on to citizen comments regarding items not on this evening's agenda. Mr. Maurer, if you'd like to come forward.
Your Honor, did you by any chance have a heart-to-heart talk with the man from Nestle?
I have not, Mr. Maurer.
Are
Mr.
you?
Mayor, we can't hear you. You're not speaking. to the microphone.
Oh, is it on?
Yes.
The mayor heard me. Okay, is it on? All right. You have not yet. Why, are you waiting for his conscience to burn?
No, Mr. Maurer, I just haven't had the time.
Are you planning on doing it?
I will ask if somebody on staff has the opportunity to contact somebody there and if they would like to respond to your concerns.
Want to send me? Well, I have no leverage. You've got everything going for you. When you see him, you can say him. When you were standing up here at the podium, did you notice anything that's related to what your company does? Did you notice? And he might remember, he might not, or he may have been struck by the fact that you're all drinking water out of a glass. You're drinking water out of the city. You have nothing to do with bottled water. And he might begin to cringe. So I'll have to keep inquiring about this. It's very serious. This is a world city. Reflects on it. I was going to say, no, I did say it, but you can't do that. As to say, you can send me if you want to, but that would not be, I'm a person of no standing up here. I am just a citizen talking. But you've got everything going for you. Well, let's see, the second thing I started talking about last time was the marketing, I guess, of the city. And I still offer, I'd like to have a private or public debate with Scott Ring because he is, his objective, I think, is to carpet the city with Irishness. And I think, why stop there? This is a world city. One could have, I've mentioned this before, festivals of all types in this city. Would the city become famous for having an Indian powwow every year? I mentioned the Chinese-American teacher over in the schools here who put on a Chinese spectacle. Did he put it on here? No, he took it to Westerville. And I think the German-Americans put on a show, but they do it here? No. They took it up to Shawnee Hills. So this is a world city, smart world city, an intelligent world city. You got to act like one. Be cosmopolitan like the world. Have one, not just one, but half a dozen festivals per year with, just make a suggestion to some of the people living in the city, see what they'd run with it. So I would very much like to talk with Scott Ring sometime, or debate with him in public about this, because they're two radically different views of how to market the city. And I suppose there's also this level to think of. People of ethnic backgrounds other than Irish, and of course I need to restate and repeat, my attitude towards Irish culture. And so that has nothing to do with it. There are other cultures, however. This is a typically American city with respect to typical immigration patterns, with typical richness of culture behind all of them. And it seemed to me staringly obvious that one tried for more than one ethnic festival. So that's, for example, do you know whether any, I mentioned I think one time after the Polish-American show we had here last year, which was infectious, which was a tremendous show, which was full of art in the show they did for us later, whether they've been invited, could be invited back. I see the red button is going, so I've flooded the room with ideas again. One of these days I'll demand to have money for them.
Thank you, Mr. Maurer.
You're welcome.
Moving on to our consent agenda and the 7 items listed therein. Does any member of council wish to remove any of those 7 items from the agenda?
Mayor, I'd like to pull ordinance 1013. I just have a few questions on that, please.
Okay. Is it a question that we could ask and then go forward with the consent agenda?
Well, we do, I don't think we've pulled one of these before. What's our normal procedure for this? And do you want me to?
Marcia or Steve, can you help us with this?
Yep. Mike, if you, why don't you go ahead and ask your question? If we can get it answered for you, we can put it back and it can, pardon me?
Yeah, Chief, if I could, this is a Franklin County Mutual Aid Agreement for law enforcement. And when I read this, there were a couple things that jumped out at me. And I just, I think it's overall probably a good thing. But having been involved with some of the mutual aid agreements with the township in the past, I know that there's a lot of devil in the details in terms of what actually happens when you enter into those. And we never had, we had a strictly emergency mutual aid agreement previously.
That's correct.
On that side, in our current police mutual aid agreement. But for instance, assistance for in-progress crimes would allow on-duty law enforcement officers from one jurisdiction who view or have probable cause to believe a criminal offense or serious traffic offense has occurred outside that officer's home jurisdiction to take law enforcement action within the jurisdiction of another cooperating agency. So when I look at that, it kind of jumps out. What define on duty? What would allow on duty law enforcement officers from one jurisdiction?
Well, in other words, an example could be an officer from Dublin on his way to court downtown, to municipal court. If
Okay.
he viewed an OVI driver, an impaired driver,
Okay.
or if he viewed an on-view criminal offense taking place, rather than having to call for another law enforcement agency to come and actually take action and not being able to do anything on their own, they could actually take action.
So we have 100,000 people come in for the Irish Festival, some of which presumably are law enforcement from.
Now, it would
really
have to be
any-
on duty. So
They
in
have to be
other
on
words,
duty.
if they're actually working in an on-duty capacity, an officer in his cruiser, an officer, detective conducting an investigation, that type of thing. It would not apply to off-duty police officers.
Because I'm worried about, potentially somebody from who knows what jurisdiction from where. It just kind of seemed like it was carte blanche.
Right, and that's what the prosecutor, the reason the on-duty provision is in there. They want to make sure that this is simply a provision to allow a very visible legal presence to take legal action if the need arose.
So that probably eliminates the issue with defined jurisdiction, because we're not going to have somebody on duty from Nebraska or California or wherever. For instance, a memorial tournament
Correct.
or
No,
whatever.
it
We've
would-
got
it-
people from all over the President's Cup, from all over the world.
Right, it would have to be an on-duty. And as you bring up, at events, this also does allow for a little more flexibility in
Outside
having
jurisdictional.
scheduled events and bringing in other law enforcement officers to help us, yes.
Okay, that answers that. The independent police action, any cooperating police agency may provide temporary police service to any other cooperating agency.
And it
Without
would have to be in
request-
the jurisdiction of a cooperating agency, so one of
Who
the
calls
assigned-
for it? Is that something we're asking for, or they said may provide temporary police service to any other? Obviously, would have to be requested. It's a mutual aid, it's a dispatching issue?
Well, actually, under this agreement, under the emergency agreement, you have to be requested. Under this agreement, you do not have to be requested. So if we simply witnessed something happening in another jurisdiction.
Or we hear about it?
Or we hear about it, if there was a reason for us to respond before we're called for help, we could.
Are you familiar with the term jumping runs?
Yeah, but I can tell you right now, I know pretty well most of the chiefs in this area, and that's not something they're going to allow. It's simply a management issue for each department.
Okay, I
We
just
want
point-
our officers primarily patrolling Dublin. Columbus wants their officers primarily patrolling Columbus.
I just want to make that clear, because we had issues with that, actually working both ways, as Gene knows, back in the day. As soon as they heard the plectron go or a run radio that they all monitor all the time, they were off to the races.
No, that's not what this is. The purpose of this agreement is to allow a little more flexibility in terms of shared services, cooperation during investigations, and assistance during scheduled events.
Okay, that's fine. That answers my questions, but I will have my eye on that to see how it works in the future.
I understand. Thank you.
Thanks.
May I
That's all
ask
I
one
have.
quick question? Is there a time limit on this, or is this forever till somebody decides differently?
Well, the goal was to have it in by January 31st, but there's plenty of jurisdictions that are still
I'm
in the
sorry.
process.
Do we
Oh,
have to
I'm sorry.
renew it every year?
I'm sorry, no.
Okay.
We actually did make a suggestion that the prosecutor review it every 5 years. The former, Mr. Smith, I'm not even sure if you know, the last agreement we had, I think was over 20 years old. So there's no legal requirement on how often it's reviewed.
Here in it actually says 3 years with an automatically renewal for successive periods.
They must have listened to our suggestion.
Good.
I missed that.
Thanks for the clarity there. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Tim,
Yeah.
after we vote on the other six, we'll have to read that as the first reading then, the title of this one. We can't take it out and put it back in. It's out, so go ahead and make your motion on the rest of it.
With respect to the remaining six?
Correct.
Right. So, I will resubmit a motion with respect to the consent agenda to approve the other 6 items listed, with the exception of, I believe it was ordinance 10-13.
So moved.
Is that right? Did I get the one, or was it 10-13?
Yes, no, that was right.
Okay,
Second.
thank you. And if you call for the vote, please.
Vice Mayor Salee. Mayor-elect Leiter.
Yes.
Mr. Reiner.
Yes.
Mr. Keenan. Ms. Janice Zerker.
Yes.
Mrs. Maureen.
Yes.
Very good, thank you. Second readings, ordinance, I don't think we
Well,
have
don't
to
you
do
have to
anything.
bring forth the 1013 now?
Didn't we essentially
It's
discuss
a
it?
first reading. for the first reading.
We can introduce it.
Yeah, we need to introduce it as, you need to introduce 1013, and then it'll be on the second reading next time.
All right, ordinance 10-13, and if you want to read the ordinance.
Authorizing the city manager to execute a mutual aid agreement for law enforcement with various jurisdictions, working in conjunction with Franklin County.
So you need an introduction. I'll introduce it.
Okay,
That's all we need
is
to
there any
do.
more discussion? All right, hearing none, we'll have the second reading together with the second reading of the other ordinances at the next meeting. Okay? Great, thank you very much. Moving on now, speaking of second readings, ordinance 01-13.
Rezoning approximately 2.9 acres located on the north side of Perimeter Drive between the intersections with Avery Muirfield Drive and Hospital Drive from PCD Planned Commerce District to PUD Planned Unit Development District, Riverside North, Sub-Area A3 to facilitate development of the site with an approximately 14,500 square foot retail building, including restaurant spaces and associated patios.
Great, thank you. Ms. Husak, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
Good.
There were no changes made to this ordinance from the first reading to tonight, so I'm here for any questions in case anything else arises, and Mr. Godotti is here as well.
Any other questions, comments?
No.
This is minor, I believe, but with respect to the proposed development text that we see in here, I'm looking on page 5, and it says, as submitted to City Council, January 14th, 2012.
Right. The packet that is in front of you is the first reading packet. We didn't make any changes to it for this reading. So we will get a signed version of this text from Mr. Godotti with the correct date of the ordinance approval.
Okay, but it was first submitted to us in 13, was it not?
That's true, that's true.
Okay. Just, no, I'm serious. I
You're
guess I
absolutely
thought,
right.
you know, did we see this that long? Okay,
You're absolutely right.
that's all. It's Mr. Mauer's influence.
Thank you.
I thought I'd say it before anybody else did. That wasn't a criticism, Mr. Mauer. Okay. Moving right along, then, if there are no other questions or discussion, Ian, if you call for the vote. I'm sorry, Mr. Mauer wants to comment on this. You signed up to comment on this.
Sorry. I have a question, which I want to leave here tonight. Some of us get together every so often and do a very presumptuous thing. We try to see if we can identify and assess the character of a community or the character of a society. There was a great philosopher in 19th century England by the name of John Ruskin. And he put all his thinking through, or not all, he thought about a lot of problems, but a lot of it he put into architecture. And he said at one point, show me your buildings, the ones you like, and I'll tell you what side of a society you are. I'll tell you what your moral, intellectual level is. Now I want to read two statements from the memo, fourth page if you want to follow, under final development plan conditions. There's a statement, this one, quote, that the applicant, that the elevations be revised to replace the gable returns with a more appropriate style. I want to read the second one, and I'll come to my question. That these green junipers on the north side of the side be replaced with winter gem boxwood. I want to back up to the first one. Replace the gable returns with a more appropriate style. Now, when you say, whoever wrote this says with a more appropriate style, that person has in mind an artistic or architectural principle or conviction that's implied in this style isn't good, do a more appropriate one. And the question is, what is the collection of principles or ideas or convictions about architecture? The second one, replace the green junipers with winter gem boxwood. Now there's an artistic architectural principle judgment involved here. And the question is, the issue is, what are these principles? Can they be extracted? Can they be looked at and discussed and thought about? My guess is there'd be a fallback position here in which one would say, well, we want traditional architecture here. Well, that just begs the question of further step. What is the nature of, and what are the objectives of, what does the aesthetics of architecture want to do? What does it reveal about the principles and the ideals of the city? So that's the question I want to put.
Mr. Mauer, I'm assuming that that's can be derived from reading the minutes, but I'll allow Ms. Husak to respond.
Well, you can. If you want.
Wholeheartedly agree with that.
Excuse me? I'm sorry, Mr. Mauer, would you let her speak?
Sure.
I would agree with you on the statement about, you can gather that from the minutes.
There are two architects and a landscape designer on P&Z, and so they will provide input like that.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Three architects,
As a
actually, yeah.
start.
Sorry, I stand corrected.
Yeah,
So-
and it's not a question to be answered in 2 minutes, 5 minutes, a week, or a year maybe. But there are guiding principles here, and one would like to know what they are. So I'll start with, you say there's one architect?
Three
Three.
architects and a
Okay, if-
landscape.
You
I don't
give
know
me
if
the
Chris
names
is
later, right?
formal.
Good.
Right.
Thank you. That's good.
Thank you, Mr. Mauer. And if you call for the vote, please.
Yes.
Yes, Vice Mayor Salee,
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider,
Yes.
Mrs. Boring, Mr. Reiner.
Yes.
Mr. Nizzi Zerker.
Yes.
Mr. Keenan.
Thank you. Ordinance 02-13.
Adopting the 2013 Residential Code of Ohio with modifications as the Dublin Residential Code.
Thank you. Mr. Tyler.
Mayor, members of council, 2013 Residential Code of Ohio, or let me back up. The Dublin Residential Code is based upon the 2013 Residential Code of Ohio, which is also based upon the 2009 International Residential Code. That code is developed under a consensus process where members of the building community, such as architects, engineers, home builders, plus government officials are involved in that process of defining that code. Once it comes to Ohio, Ohio has modified that to meet the Ohio requirements through a board called the Residential Code Advisory Committee. Again, much of a consensus process. You have other people that have input into that process. So by the time it gets to us, there are a lot of opinion, a lot of debate on what the code should be. So the base document itself, I think, is a pretty good document. What Dublin has done is taken the base document and made very few revisions to that to make it the Dublin Residential Code. Of the revisions that were expressed the last time around, there's only one revision that was actually modified, and it was actually taken out of the Dublin Code because the international or the state code actually included it in their code, so we had no need of including it into our code. So basically, our code is very similar to what we had before, and when I say before, previously in 2009, in 2006, and therefore we're just requesting a modification to that particular code.
Questions? Jeffrey, help me out here, because I thought that there was a lawsuit regarding the residential code, and I didn't realize, do I understand you to say that we can make some revisions to the code?
As a result of that lawsuit, we were allowed to make 4 revisions to that particular code. Of those revisions, we are actually deleting one because it's in the base document. We no longer need to have that as a Dublin-only provision.
Okay.
I have one question.
Are you addressing specifically the carbon monoxide?
I'm addressing specifically the carbon monoxide.
Okay,
Yes.
yeah. Because we had it previously.
We had it previously, because the International Code included it into their version, we no
Okay,
longer.
and it's been in our code for, I want to say, 8 to 10 years, probably.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Could you share with us if there's increased cost to developers as a result of the new codes?
Well, that's the big question. The state of Ohio, and I was wrong when I said 2009, the previous version of the code. The state of Ohio started a process in 2009 to actually update the 2006 version of the code. The problem at that time was, at the crux of your question, there really was not data to support what the increase was of the code provisions that were coming into the state code. So it took about 3 years for us to get through that process. And the state was satisfied that the increased cost was, I won't say it was negligible, but it was outweighed by the safety provisions of the code. So therefore, they felt that it was a good code and that that increased cost was not anything that should be negligible upon construction itself. I have heard anything from about $300 to about $3,000 to a single-family home.
I was curious about the wall bracing
Yes.
piece here. Is that, are we talking about basement, lower level kinds of underground issues, or is that some other framing issue?
Those are framing issues.
Those are
and,
not the basement wall?
No, not at all. Those are
Okay.
framing issues mostly for lateral bracing, wind bracing, those types of things.
It's
So-
funny, because I saw the piece that's going up down by the dealerships now, but at 33, and you wonder, I mean, it's just a one solid concrete block wall that's probably, I don't know, 60 feet, 50, 60 feet high. You wonder how that can sustain, especially in this kind of weather where you've got zero, and how can they build a building like that with concrete setting when the temperatures are down in the teens? Are there standards with that?
Yes, there are. There's cold weather standards, and again, this is a commercial project.
And that's
not
part of our
residential.
inspection?
Pardon?
That's part of our inspection process?
That's a part of our inspection process. There's cold weather concrete standards that they build by, and then those walls were actually braced during construction.
Right.
So therefore, it was totally in compliance with the code.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Tyler, there was some question earlier in the fall about projects being completed in timely fashion and making, steady progress and so forth. And I guess there was some question about what our code included and what the old code said and what the new code said. And I'm just curious what, when there is a building going up, what is the standard for completion and making progress and that sort of thing?
The building code allows for a specified time frame. So for instance, and I have to get into some detail here, but once a permit is applied for, you have 12 months to start construction. Once construction is started, then you have 6 months to show substantial completion. Now, we do that.
Sufficient what?
Substantial completion or substantial progress, if you will. We actually measure that through our inspection process. So every 6 months, if there's an approved inspection, we therefore can move to the next 6 months, if you will. That's how we measure it as a city because, of course, our inspectors are not out on the job sites on a daily basis. But as long as they stay consistent with that 6-month time frame, the permit itself does not expire. That really is the standard that's set up both in the commercial code and also in the residential code.
Okay. Okay. And the wall bracing is something that is just not necessary for residential construction?
Very much so necessary.
No, but I mean, obviously it is, but I
Oh.
mean, the modification, it sounds like the requirements in the international code are more strict, and that we are not requiring that strictness for some reason?
No, if you read the memo, we are actually following the state code, which actually requires that amount of bracing to be in our code as well. So it is the strict version of the code, which is being interpreted across the state, or being used across the state.
Okay, and it says it could add cost to overall home construction, so the question is there cost to developers, yes.
There is cost to developers. I can't really give you a number on that.
But it's ultimately will be passed on to homeowners, so.
Unfortunately, and again, that's a statewide provision.
But when your wall stays standing, you're happy about that.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, very good. And if you call for the vote then, please?
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Mr. Nancy Zerker?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Mrs. Boring?
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Tyler. Moving on to the first reading of ordinances, ordinance 04-13.
Declaring improvement to certain parcels of real property to be a public purpose and exempt from taxation, establishing a municipal public improvement tax increment equivalent fund, providing for the collection deposit of service payments into that fund, specifying the public infrastructure improvements directly benefiting the parcels, authorizing make-whole compensation payments to the Dublin City School District and the Tolles Career and Technical Center.
Introduction, please.
I'll introduce it.
Thank you. Ms. Mula.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. Respectfully, I'm going to request that I address both ordinance 4-13, which Ann just read, as well as ordinance 5-13 at the same time, as both serve the same purpose, establishing a tax increment financing area in the area where Ohio University will be establishing their Heritage College of Osteopathic Medicine. There's a portion of this property that is within Franklin County, and then there is a portion within Union County. But for all intents and purposes, the ordinances are both the same.
Excuse me, if it would be more appropriate then, should we probably read the next ordinance then and introduce it? And if you would, please, ordinance 05-13.
Declaring improvement to certain parcels of real property to be a public purpose and exempt from taxation, establishing a municipal and public improvement tax increment equivalent fund, providing for collection and deposit of service payments into that fund, specifying public infrastructure improvements directly benefiting the parcels, authorizing make-whole compensation payments to the Dublin City School District and the Tolles Career and Technical Center. This is Union County.
And if we could introduce that.
I'll introduce that as well.
Thank you. Ms. Mula, I should have done that at the outset.
That's okay, my
mistake.
apologies.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. As outlined in the staff memo, in April of 2012, council approved ordinance number 22-12, which authorized the city to enter into an economic development agreement with Ohio University. If you recall, there were 3 sub-areas referenced within the EDA. Sub-areas 1 and 2 each had stipulations that had to be met prior to the city conveying any property to the university. And sub-area 3 is to be retained by the city. However, over the course of the next few years, OU can propose to the city any project for that area that would be supportive of the overall development of the university. And if it is deemed supportive by the city and appropriate, the city will convey and enter into negotiations with the developer to convey the portions of the applicable property that is required to facilitate the project. Likewise, the city is able to advance projects for sub-area 3 as well. Ohio University does have the option to develop the northern portion of sub-area 3, which is known as the Hotel Conference Center site, in partnership with an independent third-party development or management company. As you are aware, Ohio University is generally exempt from taxation for the purposes of paying property taxes, or in the case of TIF areas, when those are established, service payments. However, the EDA stipulates that the Hotel Conference Center site is to be taxable for the purpose of real property taxation. If it is determined to be tax exempt, Ohio University has agreed to pay annually to the city an amount equal to the aggregate of the service payments that would have been generated if the Hotel Conference Center site was indeed taxable. So in summary, the city is asking to, and it was part of the Economic Development Agreement, to create a TIF in this area to help assist in paying for any public improvements in this area. The city is not expecting TIF revenues in any other areas other than the Hotel Conference Center site as we know it today. However, this TIF is being established now to ensure that any property that is deemed taxable, whether now through development on the sub-area 3 or in the future through transfer of ownership, that valuation could be captured within the TIF, and as a result, the city would then receive service payments, which can be used to pay for these infrastructure improvements. You will note in the TIF ordinance that this TIF is being set up as a non-school TIF, or as in the title suggested, a make-whole TIF to both the Dublin City School District and Tolles Career Center. This is normal, and in fact, the majority of our TIFs are set up as being non-school TIFs. And what this means is that for any property that is subject to real property taxation, and those property owners have to make service payments, the schools would receive their applicable rate of collections if the property is indeed taxable. The public improvements outlined within the TIF ordinance include not only those that were specifically addressed with the EDA with Ohio University, but others which would provide clear benefit to the TIF area. For example, the 270-33 interchange. While we don't expect this TIF to generate a significant amount of TIF revenues in order to fund all of these projects, we do incorporate as much as possible when establishing these TIFs in terms of public improvements to allow us flexibility to use those TIF dollars to pay for various projects and improvements. As I mentioned, there are two ordinances this evening, one for Franklin County and one for Union County. Both state the same information, just the applicable properties that fall within each of the jurisdictions. We will have second reading on February 11th, but in the meantime, I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Questions?
Angel, I was greatly relieved about sub-area 3 with the last sentence where it said, Ohio University has agreed to pay or cause to be paid annually to the city an amount equal to the aggregate of the service payments which would have been payable pursuant to the TIF ordinance if such hotel conference center site was subject to real property taxation. So I think it was a very clever inclusion, and that is one area that I was concerned about. And then I guess if there's a race, or maybe not a race, but sort of confused a little bit about the regular taxation of this particular site. So if the city develop it, it's going to be coming under a regular, and then under the normal tax code. But I guess, how is that really to be decided? Is that whoever comes forward with a proposal first? Whether, I guess what I'm suggesting is, say Ohio University develops a hotel conference center, or say they're going to. So then they move into this particular situation that's in this contract. And then, and where is, so I guess what I'm curious about is the timeline. Say Dana's got a client, how is that and when is that decided? Like, what part of this falls into what jurisdiction when?
Well, in terms of, are you speaking specifically to that hotel conference center
Yes.
site? Well, either one of the parties have the ability to bring forward a proposal. If Ohio University were to bring forward something, we would facilitate that process, and if it's deemed appropriate by the city, we would convey the portion of property to whoever that third party is. If, in this case, Ohio University is part of that, ultimately, the county makes the determination whether property is taxable or not. So that is why we built that in there, so that if it is determined that Ohio University is building their own hotel conference center facility, and even though it might not be within the core of what Ohio University's purpose is, it is deemed to be by virtue of the ownership of it by the county as being tax exempt, we can collect those service payments. But ultimately, that would rest with them. But that's why we wanted the protection both ways, so that this valuable piece of property that fronts a key piece of interstate is generating some revenue for the city.
If Dana brings the deal, the hotel first, is there a first right of refusal that would OU have a first right of refusal? Because I could see somebody kind of dragging their feet, and we get 3 years down the road, nothing happens.
No, there's no first right of refusal.
So whoever gets to the table first with the deal.
Correct. So the way we viewed this is that if a hotel interest approached the city, then we would put Ohio University on notice that we were approached, and then we would move forward with that process. If it came to fruition, then what Angel said would come into effect. If OU likewise decides to go forward, then it will be, they'll put us on notice, and then we'll know that it's what they are advancing. So
Would that preclude, we're required to put them on notice that we have an arrangement?
yes.
And so when we put them on notice, would they have the ability to approach that hotel owner and say, hey, we want to do a joint project? Which is a moot point to us because we're going to get revenue either
And that's
way.
why we built that in the way that we did.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Both ways.
That
So it really
Because it
behooves
might
us.
be, I think we would view it as being very favorable to have a partnership such as that, so.
Yeah.
Good.
But tax-wise, Dana, it really behooves us to try to come up, since it's such a valuable piece of property and we held it so long, it would be most beneficial if the city ended up developing this first.
Right, and to maximize the amount of development that would happen in sub-area 3.
Yeah, okay.
Anything else? No. Okay. As Ms. Moon stated, we will have the second reading of both those ordinances at the next council meeting, February 11th. Thank you. Moving on then to ordinance 06-13.
Amending annual appropriations for the fiscal year ending December 31, 2013.
Introduction, please.
I'll introduce it.
Thank you. Ms. Moon.
Thank you. This is a standard ordinance that is brought forward each year, which amends the annual appropriations. This one incorporates, appropriating funds for the tree replacement funding so that we can take the revenue that existed at the end of the year and appropriate it so that it can be used to plant trees on public property. In addition, this ordinance appropriates funds into our various TIF funds in order to make debt service payments. So it's standard boilerplate legislation that we bring forward each year.
Any questions?
Just a quick one. As I read through this, there's about $2.4 million. If you read through all the dollars that are being appropriated from the various TIF funds, it's all tree replacement fee income?
No.
That's TIF income.
Section 1, which is $153,462, that is the section that pertains to the tree replacement. The balance of
It's
those
TIF.
are appropriating the funds within the TIF funds for the debt service
So is
payment.
that what you anticipated? It is roughly the 2.4 million? Would you expect more or less, or that's about what you expected to come out of that? I'm just curious if it met our expectations, or is it the same every year?
It's not necessarily the same every year. It's very close, obviously, depending on the payment of our debt schedule. But certainly that, when we set our TIFs up, we make sure that there's funding available to make these debt service payments. If there aren't ample funds within the TIF funds, we might advance funding from other places so that we are correctly attributing the debt service payments to the proper TIF.
And that answers my question. Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Hearing none, is there a motion to dispense with the public hearing and immediately adopt this ordinance?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. And if you call for that vote?
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mrs. Maureen? Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Mr. Nancy Zerker?
Thank you. And then a vote on the ordinance, please?
Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Mr. Nancy Zerker? Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mrs. Maureen? Mayor Lucklider?
Yes. Thank you. Moving on to ordinance 08-13.
Authorizing the city manager to enter into a land exchange agreement with John W. McKittrick for property necessary for the Emerald Parkway Extension, Emerald 8, from Dublin Road to Sawmill Road.
Great, thank you. I'm sorry, we probably need an introduction.
I'll introduce it.
Thank you. Mr. McDaniel.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Staff has been in negotiations with the property owner for the purpose of acquiring the necessary right-of-way and both permanent and temporary easements for the construction of Emerald Parkway Phase 8. As the map in your packet and here on the wall depicts, staff recommends a land swap with the landowner. The city will be swapping land shaded here in green in exchange for the land shaded in red and yellow. I think you can see that, yellow on the screen. Both of those are permanent transactions, and the land in blue, which is a little bit harder to see on here, but probably better in the map in your packet, will be used for a temporary easement. The property shaded in green is the residual land that the city purchased from the Boer Realty Company, also for Emerald Parkway Phase 8. The total residual was 6 acres. This transaction proposes to swap 1.63 acres of the 6 with the land needed from the property owner. Swapping this acreage with the property owner will also address ingress and egress issues for the property owner as well as for the city's residual piece of property, the balance of that, which is about 4 acres. And additionally, the property owner is required by the agreement to allow the city access to its property for the purpose of ingress and egress. And that's better displayed on the other map that was in your packet. This is the community plan. This is Emerald Parkway Phase 8, future Emerald Parkway Phase 8. And you'll see that this is where the community plan requires full ingress and egress to what would be the site that we're talking about. Without that swap, this site would be isolated from Emerald Phase 8, and likewise, it would be difficult for the city's residual property to have a full access ingress and egress to the site as well. So we think this is an appropriate, mutually beneficial transaction to happen for both parties. And staff recommends your approval.
Questions?
Dana, I don't have any problem with the swaps going on, but looking at this map, and maybe it's something we overlooked, or maybe there was a reason for this, but the medium density residential, that the yellow starts bordering off to the left of the picture.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Why, with the land's value and the freeway access, and maybe this was something out of planning and a long time ago, or when we were doing this, I'm sort of surprised that that wasn't, or it didn't become on the site plan a very expensive office building site instead of residential housing.
Right. Well, Steve can chime in on this if he'd like, but I think the primary reason it was driven that direction was because there's existing housing. You might recall, you can't see it on this map, that's even further to the
Grandy
west.
Cliffs.
And I think that, yes, I think that was considered a buffer for that residential neighborhood.
Yeah, but I mean, as a tax thing, and then also, if you look at residential, buffering residential, if it's executed correctly, and according to our landscape ordinance, there has to be a buffer amount of landscaping with 100% opacity separating these two different zonings. And then, personally, I'd rather back up to an office building park than I would a bunch of series of people's private properties, fences, patios, and all their sheds and all their other paraphernalia. It's just a cleaner look and more attractive. So I'm just sort of curious, because that is one really, after paying all the money to build the Emerald Parkway, I don't get it why we would zone it residential.
I personally don't disagree with anything you're saying. I think that, obviously, if an opportunity presented itself and it would go through the zoning process and could see if something like that could happen if a project were to present itself that way. But if we were approached, we would certainly encourage this the way it is right now.
Yeah.
Unless there was some astronomical project that the city might be interested in.
Well,
we would ask
I'm just
for
saying that because of the
consideration.
value of the land, and here it is sitting on a major arterial 270, and it just doesn't seem that appropriate of a zoning. That's all.
Thank you.
Any other comment, questions? All right, we will have the second reading at the February 11th council meeting. Thank you. Moving on to our resolutions. Resolution 02-13,
Authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Tech Columbus.
introduction. Thank you. Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, good evening again. Staff provided a report to City Council along with this proposed resolution. In summary, you may recall that the 2013 operating budget adopted by City Council authorizes the expenditure of $200,000 for Dublin's local match for the Tech Start program. The city's contribution to the Tech Start program is significant and helps the region to receive back matching funds from the state of Ohio's Third Frontier program. Tech Columbus is designated as the lead agency in Central Ohio region for the administration of the Tech Start program. And additionally, Tech Columbus serves as the lead agency in Central Ohio focused on new company or business and technology startups and ultimately job creation. Business creation is one of several of the city's key economic development strategies, and the centerpiece of this effort is a combination of the Dublin Entrepreneurial Center, the efforts of Tech Columbus, and the Small Business Development Center. And Tech Columbus has been a full partner with the City of Dublin in these efforts. Per the report provided to you by Tech Columbus, which was in your packet, to date, the City of Dublin has invested $1.1 million in the Tech Columbus partnership, which all has been leveraged towards matching funds to attract additional dollars. And Dublin companies have received back over $35 million in grants, follow-on investment loans, and sales revenues. The agreement, if approved by council, represents a continuation of a very successful program we've experienced to date, and the report lists additional services that we'll receive from Tech Columbus as we have in the past as well. And with us tonight is Tom Walker. He's the relatively new president and CEO of Tech Columbus. And Mayor, with your permission, I'd like Tom to introduce himself and maybe speak a little bit to this agreement.
I wish you would. Good evening, Mr. Walker.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Thank you. It's my pleasure for being here this evening. As you can tell by my accent, I'm not from this area, but I'm proud to be a new Dublin resident and proud to call Ohio home. Your support and General McDaniel's support over the years has been tremendous. Without your funding, we would not be able to access matching grants from the state that we then turn around and put right back into the community to support high-growth entrepreneurs in the region. In my short time here, I've dug into the data, and one of the things I always look for these kind of programs are how well are the entrepreneurs able to access risk capital, because that's one of the things that we lack in this region. And here in Dublin, our entrepreneurs have brought in more than $20 million in private equity that has helped launch those companies, and those companies go on to pay tax revenue to the city. So we appreciate your partnership and your support.
Did I understand you correctly to say that you're a resident of the city of Dublin?
I am.
Well, we're happy to have you here in our
I
fine community.
was proud to find a home here, so thank you.
Where were you residing before you
I
moved?
am off of Rivers.
No. I didn't
before?
know where you're residing
Yeah.
now. There are a lot of people watching.
Where am I from?
Yes, where were you living just prior to moving
Yes,
here?
I moved here from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, pretty good.
There you have it.
I'm sorry?
You like the weather?
It's 75 degrees back where I'm from right now, and sunny.
Yeah, great, Marilee.
So we have been, as noted, big supporters of Tech Columbus from the beginning, really. And I'm curious now, under your leadership, it's because you've been here a long time already, so I expect you have a vision. So sort of what is your short-term vision? And how will that materialize into a longer-term vision of the next phase, so to speak, of Tech Columbus?
Sure, thank you for the question. Really, our vision is to refocus 100% of Tech Columbus's efforts on entrepreneurs in the region. Over the years, we've done a lot of things, and me and the board of directors have really see the value of startups to our region, how that can transform our economy. And so we are shifting our focus 100% on entrepreneurs.
And do you have a focus on the entrepreneurs, like technology or some other kind of?
Well, for us, it's high growth. So that tends to be companies in the high-tech sector, whether it's software, IT, or all the way to biotech. But it tends to be those industries that have really high growth potential. But they're also, risky to start, and they take extra resources to help start, which is why we're here, to help them.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you're centering back into what the original thought was, at least, was going to happen with Tech Columbus, because I know more about this than I should because of my son's business, but it is a problem in this region for startups to get that initial money. It seems like in this region, people were willing to do the second phase of funding, but they wanted you somehow to find money somewhere else, and the other money in Silicon Valley and everything is not, they're not too sure about Ohio, and they like to be close to where they're investing their money. So I'm glad to see that you're really going to focus in on that and help really coach and mentor the startups, that because that's as essential as money is often.
It's very important in this business, absolutely.
There was some money, I don't know if it was the angel funds or whatever, but investing in the group provided a very significant state income tax credit. I mean, it was a straight-up deduction. So I don't know if you have any of those kind of avenues in the works, but that was a big incentive for investors and certainly an important part of what you're trying to accomplish in terms of raising capital.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the Ohio tax credit. It's actually on hold right now with a lot of tax credits, but that's been an important mechanism to help grow angel groups in the community. that risk capital has to come from home. It doesn't come from other regions, so any.
And it did. I know a lot of people that invested in it, and
Yeah.
and because of that tax credit, it made a big difference on state income tax.
Big catalyst.
Yeah.
That's right.
Dana, was there anything more you wanted to add?
No, I do want to, while I've got your attention now, I would like to just remind everyone that the Dublin Entrepreneurial Center has relocated, and that we're going to be having an all-day open house on February 13th. That'll start at 7:30 a.m. and it'll go till 1:30, actually till 1:30 p.m. And we'll have tours every half hour and ask folks to drop in. So I hope that you can stop by that day.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
And welcome again. Mr. Maurer, would you like to come forward, please?
Now, do I have the microphone settled? My right
I
place?
believe so, yes.
You know, I've been up here 102 years, and if I've missed the microphone for 102 years, that explains a lot. Not a single word I've ever said has been heard. All right. At the end of the discussion on this issue, there are two charts. One of them indicates the winnowing process from 2006 to the present, I think, and then there's a more specialized one which gives the winnowing process from 2010, I think, to the present. At any rate, I'm looking at the first chart, which speaks of 132 opportunities. Now, do I understand the word opportunity to mean somebody took opportunity to apply? So 132 sort of applications came in, is that right?
Not really formal applications, but I would call them engagements with potential.
People who are interested?
People interested, correct.
Okay. And of those 132, 70 were what are called intakes. That is, you took them seriously, you thought over them a good deal on those 70?
Yes, you got to look at that as a pipeline, and as it comes through the pipeline, then there are more and more there are opportunity. They are screened, and they have a higher likelihood of.
It's a stage in the process, right? Okay, then there are, of those, 27 accepted clients, and of those 27, 20 are funding prospects, and of those 27, of 20, 14 are funded.
Correct.
14 are funded, okay. You know, incidentally, this looks like a snapshot of the economy. There are all these people at the beginning who might have had jobs if the economy were booming. Okay, never mind that.
No, I think you're right. I do think that when the economy is down, you'll see much more
Yeah.
entrepreneurial activity. I think that's a given.
Okay. Now, here's my question. You can take either one of the questions. What was the nature of any one of these 14 successful ones, or what do the 14 have in common?
I'd have to refer that to Tom. I don't know if he has that level of detail available or not.
I would say when it gets down to that level, you're talking, I'm sorry. Shall I continue?
Yes, please, thank you.
Thank you for the question. When it gets down to that level of the opportunity, you're looking at companies that, have an entrepreneur who investors see as fundable. So it's just more experienced management team. Okay? Yeah, sure. Thank you.
The other thing I would also offer about that is even though 14 get funded, many of those that didn't get funded go back and either continue to improve their idea, or they may modify their idea and continue to work through the pipeline, or the idea gets dumped and many of those people start over with a whole new idea. So it's a constant churn of opportunity.
Yeah, okay, good, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maurer. And if you call for the vote on the resolution, please.
Mrs. Voorhees? Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan? Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes. Great,
Thank
thank you. Finally, Resolution 04-13.
Intent to appropriate a 0.155 acre, more or less, storm sewer easement at 7460 Dublin Road from Matthew C. Wickline.
Introduction, please.
I'll introduce.
Thank you. Mr. Hammersmith.
Mayor and members of council, this resolution this evening declares the city's intent to appropriate a 0.155 acre permanent storm sewer easement from property owned by Mr. Matthew Wickline located at 7463 Dublin Road for the purpose of improving Dublin's storm sewer system. And in particular, this will provide outlet for drainage from the Sheffield Place Section 2 subdivision located west of Dublin Road and north of Brand Road. This was an improvement that was identified in the 1999 Stormwater Master Plan, particularly in the Limerick Road area. And if you refer to the exhibit, point of reference, this is the Dublin and Brand roundabout. And since Mr. Maurer is with us this evening, here's Mr. Maurer's property. And to the north is Mr. Wickline's property. This would be the Sheffield Place subdivision, both Section 1 and Section 2. What this will provide is an outlet for stormwater across Mr. Wickline's property in a pipe beneath the ground within a 20-foot easement, 20-foot wide, 340 feet long, to an existing culvert beneath Dublin Road, and then ultimately along the Limerick Lane area over to the Scioto River. With that, we do have an appraisal. We've have had lengthy discussions with Mr. Wickline over the years, but we are now in a position where we really just need to move forward with this improvement. We've had several calls from residents over in the Sheffield Place subdivision that would like to see this improvement made. So with that, this evening, we bring forward this intent and recommend your approval.
Questions?
To say thank you for going ahead with this. This has been, I know, very long and arduous for the staff, and I was under the impression that Mr. Wickline was looking forward to this improvement also. So it's time for it to happen, and thank you for all your work that you've done in trying to get an agreement without going this route.
You're welcome. And we continue to have discussions with Mr. Wickline. I spoke with him today, and there still is the opportunity to negotiate with him, so we're hopeful for that amicable resolution.
Paul, the improvement over, I'm not sure what the designation is, but just west of Coventry Woods Drive on Brand Road, was that Ruma's deal over there?
Yeah, Wellington Reserve subdivision.
Yeah, does this culvert, because there was significant drainage issues to some of those properties up around where the north marker is?
Yes.
Adjacent to, right, all along that whole strip.
Yeah, actually, he's a little, his issues were a little further over to the west.
But I thought those backyards of that last that abutted the Wellington Reserve had problems with water.
Yeah, we're actually have the subdivision plans in for review presently.
This doesn't help that then?
No.
Okay.
It does not involve it at all.
All right, that's all I have. Thank you.
Yes.
Paul,
Yes,
have
sir.
residents in Sheffield Place been experiencing problems?
Yeah, particularly in this area, that there just is not a sufficient outlet for stormwater in these rear yards, and so there's a lot of ponding in these rear yards, and particularly during heavy rains, just as we've been experiencing today and probably in the next couple of days. So it's not all the time, but when we have exceptionally wet periods and with rain on top of it or prolonged periods of rain, that's when they experience their problems.
Paul, we also heard about trouble on the other side of that neighborhood, I guess Wellington Place, on the western edge of that neighborhood, a very similar issue.
Yeah,
So-
and that's the issue that's being resolved with Wellington Reserve.
Right, right.
Mhm.
So I guess we're just post-development solving problems here.
Correct. I think part of the issue when Sheffield Place was developed, I think there was some difficulty trying to establish this outlet and work with the property owner at that time to gain this access and this improvement. So now it is reared its head and it's time to resolve it.
Paul, and if I remember right, Mr. Wickline's having major problems also, is he not? with
Yeah, this will
water?
be an improvement along his property and establish
Exactly. So it's
a
not
better outlet,
like
certainly.
Paul,
Like
is this
we're
go-
improving his property also.
Correct.
Thank you.
Is this going to cause us to cut the road, or is this an existing,
No, we're going to go ahead and outlet right at the upstream end of this culvert, so no, we're not going to make any improvement beneath Dublin Road. That outlet is sufficient beneath Dublin Road.
Okay. Great. Thanks very much. Ann, if you call for the vote, please.
Mr. Reiner?
yes?
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Mrs. Waring?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Mr. Nancy Zerker?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Are there any staff comments?
A couple items. This evening in your packet at your desk, there are a few
few items that we put in. The first one, Faye Gibson, she continues to work on the income tax issue, and Faye has a memo in there that talks about their continued work and the fact that there's going to be another bill introduced this week. But just to let you know that Faye is staying actively engaged on this issue and continues to work with both the legislators and the chambers and trying to resolve this issue and come up with some agreement as to where the uniformity issues are and how we can come to consensus on those. So just so you know, if you see that in the paper, that it gets introduced, that we are still involved. Secondly, there's information on the Clean Ohio Fund in that packet, and this was something that was brought up at our last MORPC meeting, and we received an email on Friday asking that instead of writing a letter in support of the issuance of the additional bonds that were approved as part of the 2008 bond levy that was on across the state of Ohio, that we submit our names for those of us who are in support of this, and I plan on submitting that on behalf of the city, and they'll just list our names on the letter that gets distributed. So just to let you know. And this is some funding that the city has received in past years. And the last item relates to the update on the community attitude survey that we had talked with council probably 6 weeks ago, maybe, with regard to working with Marty Saperstein and the interview process with residents this year. And we received the final version later this afternoon with regard to what we think is the final draft, and we wanted to submit that to council so that you have the opportunity to provide any feedback similar to the National Research Center survey that was presented to you a month or so ago. And what we'd like, if you have any comments or questions on this, if you could get it to us by the end of the week. Our hope is that we can start doing some of the pre-testing and then initiating the survey sometime next week. So if you have any comments, just get them to me, Ann, or Sandra.
Okay. Great.
And that's it.
Thank you. Mike, you want to kick off roundtable?
Yeah, just briefly, I just wanted to give staff kudos on this, the 2013 cost study review. Basically, we're going to save about $7,500 of allocation with respect to contractors, subcontractors, and consultants. And I think it's a good example of prudent stewardship, and I appreciate staff's recommendation to apply the CPI index 1.8% on that. We'll probably do that the following year, but I know that we have left an opening in the way that it's been written here. If we need to update it, we can. And I think that's just a good example of taking a common sense look at some of the things that we've got going on. Secondly, that joint dispatching study is yet another example of prudent oversight of taxpayer dollars, and I appreciate them exploring the potential cost-saving alternatives. I understand Hilliard's on board, Norwich Township's on board. I believe Worthington is, they're reviewing it right now.
Yeah, they're involved in part of the grant funding,
Yeah.
along with Upper Arlington and
Good.
and
That's good stuff, and that's kind of things we need to continue to do. I did want to mention the community attitude survey. I looked at it. I was a little disappointed in that it looked to me a lot like what he had told us he wasn't going to do, that all the things we already know. When you look at this, you're going to see many of the questions are the things that he pointed out in our meeting 6 weeks ago. Well, these are things we know. We really want to come to other kinds of questions, and I didn't see a whole lot of that in there. And hopefully, you guys, when you get a chance to review it more thoroughly, will opine on that as well. So that's just my...
Yeah, and we had several discussions at staff, and there are questions related to Bridge Street and the library specifically, something new and different that we haven't had in the past. And then there's also some of the same or similar questions, and in some cases it relates back to, for instance, the police department needs certain questions asked and answered for accreditation. And then just some of the other things that we want to keep continuing to get some of the information so that we can see how we're trending with regard to baselines and past information. So there is some repeat, but if you go back and look at the survey from the last time compared to this one, it's much more condensed than what we did.
Okay, well, I think we can hopefully I hope that's just a draft, and we'll do better on the next iteration. So, and then finally, Dana, the AEP report, and you can get back to me later on this, but specifically, I'd like to know about the circuits it's kind of difficult following the map, but the ones across the river, where we had the outages in the fairly new subdivision beyond, I think it's beyond the firehouse.
Bryson Cove.
Okay, that one, and then also Indian Run in particular, because I get calls on that all the time. If you could identify for me by email or whatever what that circuit is so I can interpret this, this memo, and I appreciate the information. That's all I have.
If I could add on, Mike, I appreciate you bringing that up because this memo kind of sugarcoats everything to me. And I sure would like to have that particular area. And I think Martin Road was out that long also. So I sure would like to have a detailed report on those certain areas that seem to be suffering right now. Not right now.
I
but in the
realize that, but I got to have a clarification. First of all, sugarcoating is not what I set out to do, but I'm trying to understand what it is that you're asking, because this is all the data we have access to. I would not have access to any more outage data, interruption data, so I just want to make sure that I understand what more you would want. I understand the circuit number issue. I can certainly address that. That's easy.
I just don't see how these figures, when they then average, how they could come up with some of these figures when these people were out for 7 days, and you take 7 days times 24 hours times, 60 minutes to an hour. Those figures come up fairly high. And if you take that circuit, I think these figures do not reflect those kind of outages.
We can inquire back to AEP, or I can invite them to come to the meeting and try to speak to that in more detail. I would not be able to get into much detail or explanation on that. It's just not data that I have, but I'm happy to do that.
Is there something that would tie this report out to streets, where we could identify what circuit, what street's in?
Oh, yeah, I can drill down on the geography of it. Yeah, I thought what I heard was requesting information about more outages, or how the data, or if there's more data available than
I just
what-
want to
than
identify the
what's-
circuit for me. I'm
Yeah,
I'm
that
not
I
really sure
can
what
do.
she wants,
Yeah.
but yeah.
I thought we got, I mean, it's not in this report necessarily, but when we have outages, we've been getting emails from Tammy, which indicates where the outages have been and the length of time of them.
Yeah, that's true, and I can give you that information, but I don't think that's going to be a lot of data that you're going to be able to draw much of a understanding from. It's not, we don't keep, she can track the number of calls we get, but I don't know that that's particularly indicative of the real
Well,
issues
how does she
that are going
obtain
on,
that
so.
information that she's?
Just residents who call.
I guess what.
And then what we do is report that to AEP.
Right. I guess what I hear everybody concerned with is we have outages that seem excessive in some areas of our community, so how is that going to be fixed in the future? And
Yeah,
that's sort of, kind of the bottom line.
Right, yeah, I certainly don't deny that there are issues. And as I try to explain in the memo, when it comes to understanding the performance of each individual circuit within the city, and whether that's good or bad compared to other circuits, I don't know. We can certainly look at how our circuits perform next to each other, and we can drill down on that. The best thing we can do is keep good communication up with AEP, try to understand in more depth what might be causing those issues. We have that dialogue with them. And I think some of that action that we have done, I want to give the city and ourselves credit for achieving improvements to circuits like 3131 in Muirfield. And I think there may be others to come as long as we keep that dialogue up and
I
that
think
sort of thing. So,
that's what's important.
Right. Oh,
because
absolutely.
You can't, it used to be kind of a minor inconvenience, you'd light some candles and, camp out for a couple of days. But when people are out for a week, so many people work from home. I mean, we are completely dependent on electricity, much more so, than ever. And, it's kind of getting to the point where it's not an option to have it, kind of off for a week. That's not really acceptable. I'm sure it's not acceptable to AEP. We know it's not acceptable to you, Dana. So what's going to happen? How are we going to fix that? And, what's AEP going to do?
Yeah, there's a couple issues been brought up here. One, that report we just got the data and looked at it. We didn't know ourselves, how Dublin compared to other communities and how AEP compared with other, so that was just the data. I mean, We understand it's a big issue, which is why we've been looking at it. I've got a suggestion, which is, why don't we have somebody from the PCO come out and explain? That was a good question. You know, why does this data appear fairly favorable when we all know that there have been some big outages? And I know the PCO will send somebody up here to address those questions. If the council would like, we could do that. And the other thing is, we don't really have a legal remedy here that's easy to get a hold of. This is regulated by the state of Ohio, and they've preempted any authority that we have. So we don't, you know, we can't reach in and grab them or make them change, but the PCO can. So maybe that might not be a bad idea. I don't know what you all think of that.
I think it'd be an excellent idea, because I think that what happened with AEP, if I recall the story correctly, was why they did act many years earlier than they had planned was because the residents of Muirfield filed a lawsuit.
That's right.
You know, with the PUCO. So
And the city filed with them.
yes, you know, it was a collaborative, but they initiated it, and we went, you know, we joined with them, which is wonderful. So I think that the conclusion I draw from that is that utility companies have a plan, and they don't change that plan unless there's squeaky wheels that really stay on top of it on a regular basis. And so I think that now moving to the PUCO, who we haven't ever had come, and learning both what their process is and everything, and then expressing our concern. And I think that Amy brings up a terrific point that, and I don't know if we have data about this, but maybe we do through tax and all, of the percent, so to speak, of people who are working from home, in addition to the businesses that are impacted by, it's not just the people working from their homes, but it's the businesses here also that lose work time. You know, so I think that's a great suggestion, Mr. Dunn.
Maybe they could explain some of this data to us, because I went through it a couple times, and it's very difficult to follow the logic in there. So many minutes out and so forth, and AEA and whatever the different.
And, you know, I think it's interesting to say we're interested in how we compare to other people. Actually, I'm not. I want my residents to make sure that they have electricity all the time. I mean, that's.
Some of the
our
businesses have been
intent.
impacted dramatically, and I see the circuits, at least to me, where the problem is where there's heavy trees and where the lines are obviously impacted. And I know we've got some tree trimming coming from somewhere in the packet was talking about that. But Old Dublin, it's funny because you had 2 or 3 businesses in Old Dublin on Bridge Street out for 7 or 8 days, and yet right next door was the Kroger Shopping Center, and it was on. And, you know, it really hurt those small businesses dramatically.
I mean, our goal is to get the best quality electrical service we can have. What I'm saying is we don't have a lot of legal tools.
No, I
We
know.
do have the ability to bring some
Sure.
pressure points, I guess, and sort of, so, I mean, that's,
Does the new substation out in the tech center area that we talked about by OU, that gives some redundancy, does that help anything with probably not?
Well, there's the one circuit out on the far west end of Dublin that, if you look at the map, consistently shows up as orange or red, so it is underperforming. I think will have the effect of that once they extend the circuit lines out.
So this is some
But,
duplication, it's some, I'm trying to think what's the proper word for that one. Redundancy. So that if one goes out, the other one kicks in right away.
And the other thing, you know, in our continued work with AEP and the issue of the tree trimming that's in the packet, when you look at where there were long outages with the storm, a lot of it was related to trees. So I think the tree trimming is one area of focus. And another example of trying to work with AEP and then working with us is we're doing some utility burial down France Road and under I-270, and they recognized and came to us about then burying the lines along Penny Lane, recognizing that you would have the 2 ends done underground, and the fact that there have been some concerns expressed about the Metro Center, and that burying the lines along Penny Lane, which is heavily treed, would be a benefit to the customers.
But when Muirfield came out, a lot of that was, if I remember correctly, it was an old circuit, and it needed updating.
correct.
And when I look at Bryson Cove, they're surrounded by old circuits, you know, Macduff, Macbeth, Martin Road area. So some of those things, I think we do need to pressure them to get some of these circuits updated and protected.
Yeah, I think Kathy's right. I think, what I've seen is exactly, Muirfield was one of the original underground utility areas for our city, and it was just wore out. And they wouldn't have fixed it unless, what Mary Lee said, there was so much pressure and it was so long in getting them to move. It was a lot longer than you might think. Finally, they realized with enough complaints. So my suggestion is that when we have these areas, that we team up with these communities and we help push them. In the end, it was a lawsuit from Muirfield because all the groceries were lost. People lost rare aquariums full of rare fish. I mean, it's just ridiculous, and it went on and on and on and on. So I think what we ought to do is when we start having these complaints coming in sequentially, we ought to take a good look at those and then join in with those people to pressure them. And a lot of it really wasn't trees so much as it was just old equipment. And they admitted to that. So.
And they had a plan to fix it in 20 years or
Yeah,
whatever.
that'd be forever getting it done. So when these people are complaining, we ought to listen and we ought to start working with them.
Well, I certainly hope I didn't come across as defeatist in any way. I think when you look in the recommendations that I lay out in this, it's a combination of all those things. We've done a lot of great, I think, and I even give AEP credit for being a partner in some of the things we've done, whether it's been line burial or burying 138 kV lines, which are unheard of, and not running them through our neighborhoods, and the tree trimming when our staff gets out front and holds hands with them and our residents when we do that. So we have a great track record, and much of that's due to your resourcing and support that you give us to do that, because we have enough staffing and ability and expertise to engage them, I think, more than most communities our size. So certainly we listen to the residents, and we garner those calls and turn those over to our liaison and interact with our liaison on an ongoing basis, which is why I think we get a lot of these things done. So, and we'll keep doing it aggressively.
Well, thank you. I'm convinced we're in a far better place today, than we would be without, the support that the city has provided to its residents and so forth. But of course, obviously, we're always striving for, something better. Any outage is an inconvenience to people. And we've all, heard from our neighbors and in some instances personally experienced these outages and so forth. But in any event, appreciate your suggestion with respect to PUCO coming, and I think that, you heard council say that they would welcome that opportunity. So when that can be arranged, we'll look forward to it, and appreciate your efforts. Mike? Okay. Amy?
Thanks. I asked Tim if I could go out of order just because I want to get home early tonight. I have cake to eat. I know, John, that we need to schedule Beautify Your Neighborhood grant here, or, a chance to go over those applications. So whenever you want to do it, I'm fairly open.
I was just going to bring that up tonight.
Yeah, so go ahead and schedule it, and that'll be fine. We have, I think, come to the conclusion that our goal setting cannot be held in February and the beginning of March. There's a number of us that are out of town on the March 1st date, and then the February date I think is just too soon. So I'll be, staff's going to have to come back with us and suggest some dates that are going to be good, and it'll just be a little bit later in the year than we originally planned. So that will be forthcoming. Other than that, I really don't have anything. So if your indulgence, I'm going to take off before the meeting is officially adjourned.
Thank you. Kathy?
Yes, I wanted to just mention two things. Dana, are you still here? Oh, did he? I noticed where Columbus was one of the top 7s in the ICF this year in intelligent communities, and I think it was based a lot on economic development, and they mentioned how many top Fortune 500 companies was located in Columbus. Kind of curious if they use the MSA area, Columbus, for their ICF application. or if you help them in any way.
I didn't hear the whole thing, and I apologize.
I noticed
stepped out.
that Columbus was one of the top
Right,
7 in the ICF process, and I was kind of curious if they used the MSA area for their presentation, or if it just was in the city limits of Columbus.
No, I think they really took, I haven't read their application. I just got a copy of it actually last week, so I haven't had a chance to read it. But I know from their previous application, and they did make it into the top 21 last year. They did not make it in the top 7 till this year. That they very much take a regional look. And as you might recall in the ICF application, there's the 5 key criteria, and then every year they add one more. And I think this year, if I recall, had to do with workforce. And I think
Yes.
that Columbus has really done some phenomenal things, and we've done it as a region too. So,
Okay.
so
Well-
I would really hope that someday we would be a smart state. I think that there's a lot going on around the state of Ohio that we should leverage together as well. So I think it's good to see the region doing it.
Well, it is nice to see the region up there again, and congratulations to Columbus. And I noticed one place in Ontario did it again, but
Yeah, and I really do want to add that I know for a fact it was regional because even the IT folks from within the region were contributing input to it. So I think Peter Hutzenitza even gave some input from our staff towards it. So
I wondered if our staff was involved at all. Thank you. On a very light note, Angel, you have my advanced sympathy. Marcia's going to be out of town February 4th through the 18th, and you're the acting manager. And every time this has happened, something really happens in the city. So I would suggest the week before you get a lot of sleep. It's sort of like a weather predictor. We'll probably have snow that week. So in any case, good luck.
Thanks, Kathy. Murley?
A few things. I was curious, Mr. McDaniel, on this recycling report, and, sort of disappointed. I thought it was really interesting, these conclusions, which I never had thought about, this element to recycling or waste, that when a decrease in disposable income and spending, that then there's a drop in solid waste and recycling. I've never heard of that.
yeah, we didn't quote a reference on that, but I'll check into that. But I do think that I've heard that referred to before. When you don't have a lot of money to spend, you're not buying a lot of products. When you're not buying a lot of products, you're not throwing away a lot of trash. Now, I've heard that before in the industry, but I have no empirical data to back it up.
I'm glad that we're second in the region. I wonder, do we ever have conversations with Grandview and Marble Cliff to understand what they're doing that we might pick up on something that we're not currently doing?
Well, this is the first time,
Besides
we haven't looked at this data for a while. I can promise you we are going to. In fact, even Swaco was up here today holding a community meeting and talking about some of the new ideas and things that they have going forward, so we'll continue to engage them, so we'll definitely
Yeah, I
do
think
that.
we have a great program, and we really, help the residents by providing the recycle, large bin and all those kind of things. So I just always like to see us keeping.
Absolutely, and I didn't offer any solutions in the memo, but that's not to say we're not looking at some ideas, and you had asked some information about the pay-to-throw program, so we wanted to get that out to you right away as well, so, thank you.
Thank you.
If I could just address the question about the ICF, through the wonders of modern technology, I just looked at the application.
And he knows how to use it. That's even better.
It's a metropolitan area, and it includes Dublin as one of the reasons.
I wondered how much we contributed in that top 500 Fortune locations and businesses and the other,
Oh, I'm sure a lot. Yeah.
the others that I heard. So it's kind of, don't want to be too proud, but I think along with other suburbs, gave a boost to their application.
It is an interesting point. I wonder why they don't do a regional kind of look, at stuff, or have another category that you could do. Just wanted to comment that I thought the joint work session on January 17th really was excellent. And I made myself a note Maybe they were there and I just simply didn't recall seeing somebody, but to be sure that the Arts Council receives a formal invitation to participate in this, because they're in the scope of what we're doing, as well as the ideas of bridges and pedestrian walkways and public art and all certainly are something that they should be listening to and contributing, to the ideas. But I felt like the conceptual went from conceptual, big conceptual, to at least bringing it down to some realities. And I'm really looking forward to the March meeting when I think it'll be honed in even more. And, coupled with the people that have already demonstrated an interest in moving forward in development, I think it's going to be a really exciting time for Dublin. As you know, Holly had called me for this newspaper article that, I don't know, when was it, 2 days ago or something? I've already forgotten when it was. But, I think she captured an interesting element to what we're really moving towards, and that it is going to be a reality, which I think that, even in talking to Terry briefly tonight, that people want to see that shovel in the ground to know that you're real. And I think we have some opportunity right now that we can help move that forward, sooner than later, as I said in that meeting. But I think it's really taking shape, and I think that the consultants that we have on the project seem to really be enthusiastic and see this as an opportunity for their own careers too, to be doing something on the cutting edge.
Yeah, I think in the last couple months, there's been a good bit of progress working with the consultants just to start framing what some of the potential could be. And as we talked about that evening of the joint session, this is not in the details of what's going to actually be in the park, but this is just to provide some framework for road systems and what the size of a park could be. So I think there has been a lot of progress, in council's acquisition of the parkland in the area was a huge impact, as referenced in the article. It really does start the ball rolling, and that also developers and landowners also know that the city's moving forward, and this is going to become a reality.
Marcia and I had a MORPC board meeting. It was kind of uneventful this time. But William Murdoch, who is the new CEO at MORPC, started today, I think was his first day, wasn't it?
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
So he came from the Ohio Department of Development, and look forward to his leadership. I chair the Regional Policy Roundtable, and my co-chair is Steve Campbell from the City of Columbus. We had our meeting last Thursday. It meets every other month. And we had a significant discussion, and we're still learning how to manage this. But as you know, the governor is interested in looking at the turnpike and how that might generate some money for the state to do other work. Transportation needs are billions of dollars for the state, with very limited dollars available from the Department of Transportation or the federal Department of Transportation. People probably underestimate in a lot of areas, but transportation is one, the amount of money that Ohio gets from the federal government. And as they are decreasing substantially that distribution, that is really going to impact Ohio and its capacity to maintain its current roads besides replacement or expansion. So we were addressing and looking at the issue of what the governor is recommending, and I think he's coming out with some of that. The fourth is his budget, and it's going to be actually the fourth is the state budget, and the transportation budget is the sixth, and it's supposed to be contained in the transportation budget. So we'll look forward to taking a position on that. Part of the issue with that is from the money that was originally earmarked by the Department of Transportation in their budget, not an earmark, it was how they were going to use their resources, that would be up at that northeast side of the state. Would that money then be redistributed? And of course the northeast communities that the turnpike goes through say yes to them, because they will have needs they obviously have transportation needs as well, so they would like that money to be retained at that part of the state. Obviously, the rest of us would like it to be. Yes. Right, that's that came out the day after our meeting by TRAC. Had actually met while we were meeting, and they're looking at a percentage distribution of that. So, it's all kind of really interesting kinds of stuff. I attended the Lincoln. This year, they did a difference for Martin Luther King Day. They Dublin residents could go to the AMC Theater and see the movie Lincoln in the morning. And they had a little program at the beginning. It was very well attended. They had to open a second theater to accommodate the number of people that came. So I thought that was an interesting way that just was unique to this year because of so many of the Central Ohio people going to the inauguration. They weren't going to have as many people available for the major program that they normally do. And I'll be out of town starting tomorrow for till February 15th. So I won't be at the first February meeting.
Thank you. John?
Well, it's time to have the Community Development Committee annual meeting for the neighborhood grants. So I did grab Amy on the way out, and Catherine.
We could get the packets tonight.
Packet should be coming. It looks like, though, Amy said she's available on the 11th before the council meeting. Is that okay with you? Sure. Okay. 5:30? Okay. Unless we're going to have an executive session, what do you think?
Well, chances are we will have one, and I would assume at this point that I would schedule it to start at 6:30.
Okay.
How many applications?
We only got 3, yeah. So we should be able to get through this pretty quick. And that's it. Thank you, Mayor.
Great, thanks, John. I just want to follow up on a question or a comment that Mike made with respect to dispatching services. If I read the attached letters correctly, and I don't know whether Marcia or the chief can answer the question, but it appears as though we're taking the lead, that they're requesting us.
Yes, the conversation, we've had a meeting with representatives from Hilliard and then a meeting with the Hilliard and the township together. And now we're looking at what are some of the issues that we need to address from staffing and how some of the technical and operational issues can be addressed or identified. And then also looking at on the financial end as to what a contract, the cost may be in order to provide the service. So we're involved in discussions currently, and I don't know, right now we don't have an exact time frame as to when we can come to some conclusion or agreement on those issues between the parties.
But it would be Dublin providing the service,
Yes.
physical location would be here.
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. And then would like to both congratulate and thank Dana McDaniel as a result of his election as vice chairman of the, this is a mouthful, Franklin County Emergency Management and Homeland Security Executive Committee. All of us are familiar with that, of course. But anyway, it appears as though Dana has served as actually a member of the executive committee or an alternate for about half his life. So anyway, I do appreciate your service. I think it's important for a community like ours to have a presence like that on that committee, and we notice it and appreciate it. Thank you. I don't have anything else, so can I say that? Well, I'm going to say it, I guess.
What was the question?
Who's the Grand Leprechaun?
Is that okay?
As long as the person has, well, I
Yeah,
don't know. Yeah.
I've talked with the individual.
And I haven't heard when the announcement's supposed to come out.
Well, it's on our calendar, so that's why I'm asking.
Well,
Well, there'll be an announcement prior to that time frame. They wanted to provide the announcement as part of the release to the paper.
okay.
We can get that information to you.
Catch me in the parking lot. Okay, thank you very much. We're adjourned.